If I was 30 or 40 years older and had grandkids, this thing would visually do it for me, but I don't know. Typical for Toyota and Lexus, these things can be
Yeah, look, spoiler alert, these things are actually very reliable. They're not perfect though, there's a few things you need to look out for.
It doesn't encourage you to want to buy a new car every 5 to 7 years. Just keep this because it's just going to be great, possibly forever. Okay, surely the Lexus ES is just a tarted up Camry, right? Even on the used market, surely these things cannot be worth the premiums that they're asking over the humble Toyota. Or are they actually one of the value for money picks in the premium car segment, especially when you consider the stellar reputation for build quality and reliability that Lexus is renowned for? Well, guess what? That's what we are here to find out. How is the Lexus ES aging? Should you seriously consider buying a used one? Let's start with what goes wrong with these, especially with the exterior. Apparently, nothing. Look, we've been trawling through owners groups and forums and reading various reports about commonly reported issues with these, but when it comes to the exterior, really the only problem we could find was that the sunroof on occasion could develop just a slight rattle. However, Lexus did publish a service bulletin on this, and according to the owners, that fixed it right up. And look, aside from that, when it comes to the exterior, apparently nothing else goes wrong. Compare this to much of its competition like the BMW 5 Series, Mercedes-Benz E-Class and Audi A6. When we featured many of these cars, we came across a range of common complaints regarding everything from paint quality issues to hit and miss fit and finish and inconsistent panel gaps to various electronic gremlins and consistent roof-related water leakage issues. But when it comes to this, the 7th generation Lexus ES, none of those issues whatsoever. If anything, when you go over the exterior of these things, the paint quality is exceptional. The panel gaps, super accurate. No electronic faults whatsoever. The build quality and fit and finish and just attention to detail is outrageous. Even when it comes to working out which ES you should buy, even that is incredibly simple. Unlike BMW, Audi and Mercedes-Benz, there's no need to try to figure out which of the several engine options and a dozen or so trim specs and various special editions and endless options will be best for you. Here in Australia, you'll simply have 2 models, 2 possible power plants, with the majority on the used market being the hybrid, 3 trim specs and a couple of optional enhancement packs, and that's about it. Obviously, internationally, there have been more options to choose from than that, and also globally, there have been a couple of updates to choose from as well. These feature the usual aesthetic and equipment updates, but it's inside where you're going to notice the big differences between the iterations, and we'll cover all this when we get inside in a second. Also, it's really important to understand that constantly improving a car, even within each iteration, is honestly part of Lexus's and Toyota's DNA. So therefore, you'd like to think that the more recent the car, the better it's going to be. Now, as for what you'll be paying on the used market here in Australia, currently these things kick off from around about $40,000 and they top out at about $90,000. However, when you start comparing the Lexus ES to the competition, these things start to make even more financial sense. Take a 2022 Audi A6, brand new, the Audi will be asking around about $20,000 more than the Lexus. And that's obviously before you tick any of the option boxes on the Audi. But on the used market, the equivalent A6 and ES are going to be asking around about the same price. And that's because Lexus as a brand on average retain way better value than pretty much all of the competition. Although arguably one area that the Lexus cannot match the European competition is when it comes to the looks. Look, obviously the looks and design are subjective, but just for me, I don't know, maybe because I know deep down this thing shares so much with the Toyota Camry, or maybe, if I was 30 or 40 years older and had grandkids, this thing would visually do it for me. But I don't know. Although in saying that, when you might meet someone and you don't find them all that attractive, but the more you get to know them, you suddenly start going, I'm actually starting to really find this person attractive. The same is happening for me with this car. The more I drive it and the more I experience it, the more I'm actually going, I'm starting to like the looks of these. Also, a hot tip when it comes to the visuals of the ES, maybe think about it in the same way a lot of Land Cruiser owners think about the 70 series. It's more of a blank canvas that allows you to express yourself through modifications and accessories. Because if you make the right choices, it could look as good as this. Now, if making your car look as hot as that seems incredibly tempting, our hot tip here is to check out our mates at Automotive Superstore. No matter if you are after aftermarket wheels, performance suspension parts, car care, dash cams, upgrading the speakers, Upgrading the infotainment system, which you might have to in this, even full drive accessories and towing parts. Automotive Superstore have over 400,000 different parts and accessories, so pretty much no matter what you need, they'll probably have it. Also, to make sure that you are getting the right parts, all you've got to do is type in your rego details into the website and it will filter down to the parts that are going to suit best. Plus, you're going to have Automotive Superstore's fitment guarantee. Now, just elaborating on the whole, you might have to upgrade the infotainment system. That's because, unfortunately typical for Toyota and Lexus, these things can be shit. Don't get me wrong, it's not all bad. We only found a tiny handful of complaints regarding connection issues with Bluetooth or Apple CarPlay or Android Auto. And the more recent systems and the last 2 updates have improved this out of sight, but these early systems, they're feeling very dated. The big issue here seems to surround the trackpad or the touchpad and how it works, and also just how the native interface isn't intuitive at all. Look, for me, being left-handed in a right-hand drive car, I actually quite like using this system, and even if you're not left-handed, you will probably get used to it over time. But the issue can arise when you go from this into something like a BMW with their iDrive system, because honestly, that's like going from dial-up internet to high-speed NBN. The difference is that dramatic. But aside from the infotainment system niggles, what are the other complaints and issues that the ES is guilty of inside? Nothing. Okay, look, a few owners did complain that they wish these lower plastics were sort of soft touched the same way they are in a BMW 5 Series or an Audi A6. Although in saying that, being sort of hard, scratchy plastics does mean that they're very resilient. But again, that's honestly it for common complaints. These things seem to be faultless inside. And again, like, how does this happen? Because if you go back and watch any of our videos on Audi, Mercedes-Benz and BMW and any of the European stuff, you'll see complaints about air conditioning systems, infotainment systems, electronic issues, fit and finish problems, leather not being aligned properly, rattles and squeaks and just cheap plastics everywhere. But in this, no, none of those problems. Actually, this is starting to really annoy me because, a bit of behind the scenes gossip here, I'm starting to not enjoy doing Lexus videos because we have to spend so much extra time trying to dig so deep to find any common issues with these. When you jump on like a Mercedes-Benz or BMW forum and just type in something like air conditioning, you'll be presented with pages and loads of threads regarding air conditioning issues and the little flaps failing or the motors failing or they're whirring and making weird sounds. But in these things, finding issues in a Lexus, it's like trying to find a needle in 1,000 haystacks. Even the bloody ergonomics and the seat comfort in here. Granted, these are the F-Sport seats, so they are exceptionally good, but why can't Lexus stuff something simple up, like having some weird lumbar support thing? Or make the usability of the car a bit of a pain in the neck? Like, make the buttons at least feel a bit cheap and nasty. Come on. Actually, just on the feeling of this thing, everything in here, sort of above your hip line, just feels so premium. And check this out, Mercedes-Benz. This is hand-stitched leather, and look, it's in a straight line. Plus on the models with the timber trim pieces, that's actual timber veneer, not plastic impersonating timber. Even the door handles and the door pulls themselves, these don't rattle and squeak and feel like they're about to fall apart in your hand. And you've got to remember, these things cost substantially less than the equivalent E-Class. Actually, just on the door handles, not only are they just gorgeous little sculptures, they fit so nicely in your hand, and they're actually made from metal. And then as far as actually living with this interior, let's talk practicality first. You've got pretty average sized glove box, actually very, very small. But then you've got a spot perfectly sized for your phone just here, or you could put the car's very funky key just there, cup holder here, charging points and auxiliary input just there. This is ingenious. You've got a bottle holder here, but then if you don't have a bottle and only have a small cup, like a small pretentious coffee, this bit there, push this button, that flips down so it adjusts the height. You've got a bisexual center console because it swings both ways. Great storage under there, wireless charging pad there. You've got a little storage cabinet just here specifically for Nivea lip balm there. You've got this bit here is designed specifically to collect life's filth and dust, but it is actually felt lined down there, so your filth and dust won't go flying about all over the place. Okay sized door bins, and they're not lined like they are in an Audi A6, so when you put your bottle in there, it's just going to rattle around a bit. And that's about it for practicality. Pretty bloody good. Also, when it comes to living with these interiors and how they are for resilience, we spoke to somebody that owns a fleet of these for his hire car company, and he's owned E-Class 5 Series A6s, a bunch of cars, and he stated that in terms of resilience, these things leave everything else for dead. But yet again, all the leathers, everything still feels super soft and ultra premium. And then there's the stuff you get. Unlike a lot of the competition where to get it fully featured, you've got to tick every single option box, even in standard form, these things come incredibly well equipped, especially when it comes to safety features. Actually, you know what? There is so much kit in here, we simply don't have time to take you through it all, let alone if you spec up to an F Sport like this or a sports luxury, then you're talking things like active noise cancellation, double glazed windows, all of the bells and whistles. Honestly, no matter what you want from a car, chances are there will be an ES that has it. Actually, if you can stretch the budget to an F Sport or a sports luxury, this means you're probably going to end up getting the outrageously good 17-speaker Mark Levinson sound system. It sounds recording studio levels of amazing. Go listen to one, even if you don't buy it, just go listen to it. Now, quick tip here, if you do need more information on the ES, go to ReDriven.com and check out our free cheat sheet. Honestly, if you're in the market for one of these, it is an absolute must read before you buy. Now, it's at this point of the video that we would normally recommend you push every button and try every function, like the blade scan adaptive high beam and the rain sensing wipers. But let's be honest, chances are in here, everything's gonna work. However, we are talking a used car here, so there is a chance that some of the consumables, like the wiper blades, might be on their way out. But here's the hot tip. Don't go paying too much for the OEM wiper blades, and don't waste your time trying to work out which of the thousands of aftermarket options might fit or might work okay. Instead, get yourself a set of Wipertech wiper blades by hitting the link below. We recommend Wipertech because they are honestly the only wiper blades that we choose to use, and they're so easy to order online and fit, and they're going to work an absolute dream. Plus, when you order a set via the link below, you're going to get 15% off and free express shipping. Check them out. That is, unless like Kazi that has lent us this car, you lend us your car to feature, and if that's the case, well, we're going to give you a set for free as a thank you present. To volunteer your car, just hit the email link below or message us on the socials. Now, on the topic of supremely talented yet maybe interesting looking things, in the back seat, I'm exactly 15 centimeters taller than someone else that shares the initials ES, Ed Sheeran. This is in my driving position. Have a look at the amount of space back here. I'm starting to feel like I need Ed Sheeran levels of wealth so I can afford to employ a driver, because this has got like limousine vibes back here. There is so much space and so much knee room, good amount of foot room. The seats, like the front, just ultra comfortable. I thought with the design as well I'd have like no headroom, but I've got plenty of headroom back here. Even the materials used, all these leathers and the stitching, and it's just beautiful back here. Then in terms of features and practicality, you've got power outlets, USB points, you've got air vents, you've got map pockets back here, door bins that you can actually get to if you have legs. You can collect your life's filth and dust here. Then pull down armrest, which is insane. So you've got storage under here, which is felt lined, so nothing's going to roll around. You've got a little storage cabinet here. You've got your cup holders that kind of rise up. Then you've got more access into the back through here. This is just, it's an outstanding rear accommodation area. And then in the boot, look, it's good news and bad news. Good news first, it is massive back here, and even the opening aperture is a good size. But the bad news, you can't fold the seats down. The reason for this is that Lexus have incorporated what's called a V-brace. It's basically there to keep the car super rigid, so even after 25 years, it's not gonna rattle and carry on. But the problem is you then can't fold the seats down, so it's not quite as practical as some of the competition. But what about when it comes to driving it? Do the owners, or even I for that matter, have any complaints? Well, no, not really. Look, a few people did mention that because it is such a long car, it's actually about the same length as a 300 series Toyota Land Cruiser. Parking it can maybe be more of a challenge than you'd like. Also, a few people mentioned, most likely people that have never driven one or completely missed the point of this category of car, they did complain that it's annoying that it's front wheel drive. Look, obviously we'd all love it if it were rear wheel drive, and in some markets, not Australia, all wheel drive has been available. But this being a front wheel drive in this category of car in somewhere like Sydney makes total sense. Look, you've got to remember, this isn't a performance car. This thing has no aspirations to get your heart racing. If anything, it's trying to do the opposite, to get your heart rate to slow down and just relax. And at that, yeah, it nails the brief. The other thing it nails is just this sense of complete refinement. It's so quiet in here, especially when it's in EV mode. It's near silent. Okay, there's a sense of quality in a lot of cars, but in this thing, it's just the build quality is incredible. You can sense it when driving. Look, I'm going to potentially sound like a wanker saying this, But look, I thought it was going to feel like just driving a really fancy Camry, but it doesn't. It feels more special than that. It feels like it's got a whole other depth of talent to it. And it just encourages you to be smooth with how you drive. There's no encouragement to like floor it to move forward. You just kind of progressively move forward with much enthusiasm. It's fantastic. Another common complaint, and this isn't Lexus's fault, it's just because Australian legislation now requires manufacturers to have every bloody beep and bong and warning going off all the time, but oh my God, school zones, speed alerts, autonomous emergency braking alerts. It's just a constant cacophony of beeps and bongs and warnings, and it's so bloody annoying. Also, this being the F Sport means it has the fancier suspension, and the way this thing rides, even after 6 years and over 60,000 kilometers, is still exceptional. It's so smooth. Again, so refined. Actually, you know what? This raises something regarding the ES and its competitors. All the cars in this class, when they're brand new, are just wonderful to drive. However, as they age and load more and more on Ks on the car, that can all change. As we've seen in so many of our other reviews of cars in this class, as you drive it more, you know, the refinement starts to slip. The suspension gets a bit either harsh or overly soft, and you get some creaks and rattles and whatnot. But in this, no, none of those issues. And look, sure, when brand new, these might not be as dynamic as some of the other competitors, but where they seem to degrade over time, possibly thanks to Lexus's just obsession with build quality and fit and finish, this just stays completely consistent. It doesn't encourage you to want to buy a new car every 5 to 7 years. Just keep this because it's just going to be great, possibly forever. However, as utterly exquisite as this thing is to drive, a lot of people do have concerns about hybrid systems. How do they age? What happens? Plus, this is a 2.4 litre Toyota petrol engine. They don't have a great reputation when it comes to oil consumption. What's the go with these mechanical concerns? What happens? Well, unfortunately, I can't speak on that because I'm not a qualified mechanic. But Jim is.
There was a small group of them around the 2019 model years that did have some issues with their pistons, typically all done under warranty or with part of a recall. Some of the early year models also had an issue with some of their cam phases. That's basically the adjustable camshaft timing, usually because of a oil control valve sticking, but again, most of them were done under warranty, so really not something you're likely to come across. Some of them can actually use a bit of oil, so you need to keep an eye on that, but it's nowhere near as bad as the old 2AZ models, so yeah, occasionally you might have to top it up. And some of them did have an issue with their high pressure fuel pump around the 22, 23 year models, but all taken care of under warranty. The EGR valve on these is a relatively common problem. Sometimes the valve can stick open and that just makes them run terribly. And other times the EGR cooler can actually leak internally. Now when that's bad enough, that can allow coolant into the inlet manifold and sometimes into the combustion chambers, which is not ideal. If you're seeing white steam or smoke out of the back of your exhaust, don't rush in and do a head gasket. It probably isn't that. Have a good look at the EGR cooler. It's probably that. The water pumps and thermostats, like every car, they occasionally can leak, although nowhere near as common as some of their European equivalents. They're not really equivalent though, are they? The coolant bypass valve on these can be problematic. Sometimes it sticks open or sticks shut and typically will log a fault code telling you there's an issue. Extremely unlikely to cause any short-term problems and most certainly won't make the car break down. It's more annoying than anything. The PCV valve, that's the positive crankcase ventilation valve, that can be problematic for some owners. Lexus actually have this listed as a service item. I think they schedule it for 40 or 50,000 Ks or something. Look, no one ever does it. It's way too hard to get it. It's in under the inlet manifold and it's a pain in the ass to do. Typically, you would only realistically, in the real world, change that when it fails. And if it fails, you might get a few fault codes relating to abnormal air-fuel ratios. The hybrid systems in these, the battery is completely bulletproof, very unlikely to have any issues with that. And if you do, they are actually relatively easy and cheap to change. The transmissions, the ECVT, look, it is very reliable, extremely unlikely to have any issues with that as well. In fact, I'm going to go out there and say it's probably one of the most reliable, no, it is the most reliable CVT on the market today. And the automatic transmission in the non-hybrids also very reliable too. Look, mechanically speaking, there's a good reason why you see so many of these as taxis and Ubers. They are just very reliable. And I'm not going to sugarcoat this, they are actually more reliable than anything from Europe in this category.
Now, something else worth mentioning, especially if you're in the market for one of these, is that when we were researching this, we found loads of comments online basically saying, oh yeah, look, totally respect Lexus for their build quality and reliability, but the brand just doesn't excite me as much as, say, a BMW or a Mercedes or an Audi. And yeah, I used to completely agree. See, before starting ReDriven, I too used to completely respect Lexus, but I never really considered buying one because it just wasn't as interesting a brand as the other alternatives. But now that my job is researching used cars, oh my God, my whole approach has completely changed. Look, I really hope this translates, but when comparing owner feedback and our research on the ES versus its European rivals, the difference was massive. When we've covered the Euro alternatives, we had to find ways of compressing the lists of common issues just to keep the videos under feature film length. But with the ES, we've honestly really struggled to find anything worth complaining about. And look, if you can afford the higher maintenance costs, the risky reliability, and can just justify the steep depreciation for a European car in this class that you absolutely love, yeah, look, go for it. It's risky, but you know, it's your money. But if you want bulletproof build quality, class-leading reliability, and what might be the most refined driving experience in its class, it simply has to be the ES. Although, there is another car that we haven't mentioned at all yet, and it pretty much ticks all of these boxes and might even surpass this in a few others. It's this. But if you own one of these, can you let us know in the comments what your ownership experience has been like? That way, anyone potentially looking at buying one has even more resources to draw from. You guys are legends, thanks so much. What goes wrong with these? Let's start with the exterior. I've gone blank. Kicking off with the exterior, I keep going blank. What am I trying to say?